Okay, good morning and
I am
welcome.
not making a comment about that
Good
one. Hi, Brian.
Hello. Well, good morning. Welcome to
I feel like I'm in
the
your
Planning and
department
Development
meeting.
Committee. It is 10:32 and I will start with the roll call. Vice Chair of Planning and Development, Mr. Cobb.
Here.
Member Kuda is excused and Chair here, Davita Russell. So we're gonna go with, today we are talking about creating the ongoing creation of the Noble Merchants Association. We also have on our agenda Starlight. But today is Pastor Hicks' birthday and he is not able to attend. So we'd like to wish him a very happy birthday. And Taylor Merchants Association as well will get an update. And so here to represent both districts is Myra Onstein, who will be giving us kind of an update on the budgets and so forth.
Okay.
So I'm gonna turn this meeting over to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm gonna give an update on what I've achieved and also some questions that I have. At the last meeting, Councilman Cobb had asked me to cut the budget, to reduce the budget, saying that it was a Mercedes budget and I had to come in with a Honda budget. And so I did revise the budget, and in the meantime, I also met with Brian Iorio and talked about line items that could be reduced in the budget. But in that conversation, Brian also mentioned to me that there was no money to be allocated for these projects, that the money had already been spent. At which point I contacted Councilwoman Russell and Councilman Cobb and asked what I should do from here. And at that point, I believe he contacted you, Eric, or someone in your department. So I don't know where the money is right now or if there is any money. I have created a second budget that's reduced. But before I get into that, I wanna know if there's even money out there. Is there money? You defer to
Well,
Eric.
they did respond to me.
Okay, and
I think we mentioned this briefly before council went on recess, but we wanted to have a conversation with council, or at least the committee, because there's money that had been set aside through ARPA for business assistance. And it was our understanding the original intention was that it was gonna go to individual businesses, but that doesn't mean that it has to go to individual businesses. And so there is this pot of business assistance money, which the Merchants Association would fall into a category of that. So it's really, I think what it comes down to, it's a decision of that council needs to make to allocate those funds.
That's my understanding.
okay, the
And so we
original conversation from when I remember from Cedar Fairmount was that X amount of dollars were being allocated specifically to those two districts, to Noble and South Taylor, and that the remaining portion, whatever it might be, was going to be given to the SIDS. So I don't know when that changed into an individual merchant allocation versus a group allocation.
And I'm not sure it ever
You're not sure it ever did?
crystallized that way,
Okay.
but the conversations
Yeah.
over last year were really about sort of
Yeah.
businesses.
I didn't know about the SID allocations going to SIDS. But what I do recall is that we were going to give either Future Heights or someone $300,000 to create a merchants association. Because they were kind of, both people during the ARPA process came in about wanting to be the people who created the the Merchants Association. Do you recall that?
I do not.
I know you guys have
I
mentioned
do.
this in the past, yes.
So they had made two proposals to city council. One of those was for a property redevelopment, and the other was, I believe it was a $400,000 to $500,000 request to manage merchant associations throughout the entire city. And that would have included the Noble and Taylor. We did not fund that.
Okay,
We only funded their real estate endeavor. So that's what happened there. And then specific to the earlier question about ARPA, we allocated $1.4 million for business assistance. And that was broken out into $500,000 for the Noble neighborhood, $500,000 for Taylor, and $200,000 for all of the other districts.
okay, so.
And then there was some other money that was allocated for Taylor and Noble to develop, to have development plans. And that was an additional 200,000, 100 for each of those neighborhoods.
And that was from the new development? Because I know the mayor had also said he was going to give some money for,
That's a separate.
that's separate,
That's
okay.
separate. Okay, so
okay.
let's stick to
But
this
just to-
part first,
Yeah.
just so we.
To, clarify, so it, Councilman Cobb's numbers are almost correct, it's 1.4 total. It was the 1.2 that was going to business assistance, and then the 200K was for the planning, so total was 1.4.
Okay,
And just to take it another step granular, so we and council brought on UBIZ, which is what do they go by, Urban League,
Yeah, they're part of the urban league.
To create the application.
to basically prepare the application and then to also assist in $300,000 worth of allocations, so helping to vet businesses. And so that finally is getting off the ground, thankfully, and Julie and Brian talked to you about that. But it was that remaining 900K that was gonna be split between Noble and Taylor, and then the rest of the city.
Okay.
And
Alright.
so again, that's where, whether it goes to individual businesses or goes to a merchants association, that's really a call that council can make.
So let me ask, with the individual merchants, it's been so long since that money was allocated and nothing has happened. Are there still the same businesses that exist today that are in our business district that was affected by COVID?
So the UBIZ contract and targeted businesses, because that is what we call bucket one of ARPA money, so all of those rules apply. So that pool of money has to go to businesses that were open during the pandemic and can document a loss. So that's what that money goes towards. Now, the remaining funds for business assistance can be much more open-ended in terms of eligibility, including for, obviously new businesses that opened up after the pandemic.
So I guess, do we know how many businesses are still open and existing prior to the COVID? Because I know a lot of those businesses, because we did not allocate the money, a lot of those businesses closed and are no longer within Cleveland Heights. So I was just wondering, do we have a number on those businesses?
I mean, I guess we haven't taken that specific head count.
Okay.
And I guess, whether it's Noble Taylor or it's city.
No, I mean all citywide.
Yeah, citywide. I mean, I think there's enough businesses that are open still that were open during the pandemic. The question I think then will be, are they able to document a loss, and were they not already reimbursed through PPP or other sources for those losses? So some of it is gonna be, and that's why we brought UBIZ on to go through the accounting and figuring out who is eligible to receive those funds.
so the PPP funds, if somebody got PPP funds, they can't get this money also, correct?
You can't get
You
paid
can't get
twice for
both.
the same loss.
Okay, alright, got it.
But just to reiterate what Brian said, that's for that 300,000 that
Yeah.
is in bucket one, that's UBIZ. The remaining 900, which we put in what we're calling revenue replacement funds, are much more flexible.
And are there specifics for the funds in bucket one that can be used by the merchants, and do they know about it? I shouldn't have asked this as a two-part question, but is there awareness out there and are there specifics for how they?
So UBIZ is ramping up their outreach and all of the timing on the program, and that's, you know, that should be fairly soon.
Okay,
But, you know, generally, since that is bucket one, it's pretty prescriptive from the federal government what is and isn't
Yeah,
eligible.
okay. I just wanna know because when I'm in touch with the merchants, they're gonna ask me about this and so it's good if I'm clear.
And if you remember, a couple of P and D meetings ago, UBIZ was here, was it Donna
Yeah.
and a few others, so
Mhm.
at least there was that initial introduction and I think
I
as you
remember
could
her.
see, they're gonna be very proactive. They just
Good.
have to get going.
Mhm.
Terrific.
So with the, what was the initials used, PPP money?
Mhm.
Is that money allocated during COVID or was it allocated after COVID?
Well, it was during, that was
During.
the, you know, the federal government program to, you know, supply, you know, funding for all the businesses who were, you know, obviously taking losses and closed or heavily reduced sales during that time period.
Yeah, a lot of the restaurants that I work with took advantage of that money.
Right, so I was just wondering, I guess in my head, if they were giving money to all businesses to help them sustain themselves during the COVID, would this money not be able to help the people who are still taking loss after COVID? Or suffering after COVID? That's what I was just wondering.
I mean, the federal government set dates for what they consider that period of time, so you have to be able to document the loss during that time period.
Okay.
But I think it's a question maybe we could ask UBIZ is that if they used PPP for something during a period of time and then this happened afterwards, but still within an eligible period,
Mhm.
if they're able to
Mhm.
double dip on that.
Mhm.
So we can ask that question.
Yeah,
And also if it could be piggybacked, if someone was covered by PPP for a certain item, can this money be used for another item?
mhm,
You know, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll ask that question.
okay.
alright, great, thank you.
Mhm.
And if I could, I
ahead.
would just ask that before you finalize anything, that you guys get back to council
Oh,
on
yeah.
that, because we did reserve the right to
Absolutely.
determine the parameters of the programs.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're really relying on UBIZ right now to sort of get the program, the bucket one program established, because they're experts in this, and then, so we'll fill you in on all that.
So then to get back to the earlier question, there would be money that council could allocate.
900,000. Right, according to what you just said.
He's just saying what the total bucket is.
Yeah, the
Right,
total
yeah.
budget.
Okay, so there is money for Noble, correct? Somewhere.
In
Council would need to
With
make that
council's
decision.
theory, right.
With council's
In theory.
approval, there might be money for Noble, alright.
Subject to the geographical allocations.
Right.
And I don't know how, if we determined how we're going to allocate this 300,000 citywide, or would be tough to know until we actually start getting applications and dispersing it.
Well, I do think the intention was to have that, sort of split the
Yeah.
way that council intended, which is some to Noble, some to Taylor, and then some more general.
Okay. So, thank you for that.
But I would just add that the 300K probably couldn't go towards the Merchants Association because that
No,
wasn't-
understandable, totally get
So
that.
we should focus on the 900.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, okay, so focusing on the 900, so the next thing that happened was, I had conversations after that about, with the merchants about where we're going, what we're doing, and also had done some research about the other SIDS budgets. And the budget that I had presented to Brian, came down to like 170 something thousand, and I have those numbers with me. But then when I looked at like Coventry's budget for the SID and Cedar Fairmount, they're both around that area, the same price. And so I questioned if we've got a quarter mile district on Coventry, and I know it's a quarter mile because I've worked with them, and smaller than that on Cedar Fairmount, then how come I'm coming in at the same price range when Noble's 2.5 miles? I mean, I don't understand why they wouldn't be getting more money because they have more territory. And we also have more obstacles because I've got to work as an umbrella organization with different segments to promote on Noble because of the spacing of the merchants themselves. So I'm throwing that out there. I don't know what to do about the budget at this point.
I haven't seen your updated budget.
Okay.
Keep in mind that those SIDs are funded with property tax dollars. I would expect that the operation costs for a SID would be different than the operating costs and expenses for a merchant association. I don't know what if your scope of intended services that the Merchants Association is gonna provide for a SID, then yes, I would agree with you.
Yeah, it's pretty much the
But
same.
I don't think that, I don't know that that's what we envisioned in setting up a merchants association. That
Okay.
it would be the exact same as a SID.
What we had discussed, the merchants had discussed with me, was that this is kind of a stepping stone, phase one kind of
To go into a SID.
situation. Because they recognize that the building owners in Noble, and I can speak about Noble more intelligently than I can about Taylor at this point, that the building owners on Noble would be less inclined to support a SID because they wouldn't see the benefit if things remain status quo or if they're coming in at a level that they're at now. So if this is to be considered phase one, and phase two is that we eventually morph into a SID, the basis for the budget that I put together, which they've looked over and they agree with, is based on what I had done with a SID, with the added factor that they're starting from nothing, which means they have no branding or any of that, which the SIDs already have. So, so with that in mind, when I put together the budget, one of the things that I know that you had questioned was the line item for a mural, saying that that Heights Arts had been allocated X amount of dollars to do murals in different areas. And I contacted Rachel, and Rachel told me that there was no allocation for Noble at all. And so I didn't know whether there was any kind of follow-up on your end or on council's end about how that was gonna happen, or whether she has to change her budget or what. So even though I have revised the budget, I still have question marks because I don't know about those things. So has she clarified any of that with you?
I have not talked to Rachel. It's my understanding that what they had in mind was not a citywide expenditure of that money, which was not what council intended. I'll have to go take a look at the contract that was ultimately signed between the city and Heights Arts to see if it did say that the money that you had were given had to be spent citywide. Council wasn't involved in the drafting of that contract, so
Okay.
I'm gonna have to take a look at that, but it was not our intention that all of that money be spent, as I understand, on
Yeah.
on branding for Coventry and Lee Road.
Okay,
I don't know the details either, but I know that that's the change in the scope of what Heights Arts was doing was why they came in later as a nonprofit in the ARPA process. If you remember, council got that towards the end of 2024, whereas most of the other nonprofits had their contracts earlier. So there was a change that happened from the original application, which I think you're referring to, which was a Noble focused
Yeah.
effort and something different.
But I'd love to see the new budget.
I'm gonna send it to you right now.
Um,
So I did both, I mean, I want you to see both so that you can see where the cuts are. So what I have done, and also, should you introduce the people in the room?
Yes, I will.
So what I did was I created both, I'm sending out a copy of both the original budget and the revised. And on the revised, let me grab the revised. The revised has markings in green, which I hope I have here. Great, I don't have the revised budget.
I do.
You do.
Want me to make copies of it? Or do you
Wait a
have any
minute.
other?
I do have it.
Okay.
I thought I did. That's very weird. Okay, so
Have
what
any
I've
more?
done is in green, I've,
You have any more?
Do you have copies of it?
here, here's the original.
Oh, okay. Do you need it for yourself?
No, I don't.
Okay. And just so that
Here you go.
everyone know, we have a couple more merchants that have joined us, and what I call you, a developer?
Yeah.
Yeah, a developer who is interested in
One of the
the
updated, you already have.
Noble and
Right.
Taylor area, who's been
Building a wall.
look, stalking us. So that's, no, so that would be great. So while Myra is passing out the information, why don't you all introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Jackie Rimmer. I'm the owner of the Exclusive Touch over on Noble, directly next to the police training facility and across from the Archwell Health Facility, I guess is what it's called.
And you're part of the Merchants Association that's being established.
Yes, I am one of the starting merchants that is helping form NABA.
Hi, Delisha Robinson, founder of Pride Among Daughters and Sisters. We're at 2197 Noble Road, and I am a board member of NABA.
Jeremy McBride, founder of Flavor Neighbor, brand and restaurant development house. Cleveland Heights is very important to my upbringing. Like I said, I'm a native. Mother was a teacher in Monticello for 35 years. And I'm just really hell-bent on coming in and doing something positive in Cleveland Heights, starting with quality dining and community spaces.
And good morning, Lothario, excuse my tardiness. Partner with Jeremy, grew up in Cleveland Heights grad. I own a construction company, and I'm also partners in a number of ventures with Jeremy. So love to be a part of you guys. It's my second meeting with you guys, so hopefully we get to some of the nuts and bolts of what we do.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for stalking us.
Of course,
We love that.
listen.
We want people who are interested in the Noble area,
Oh, you have
definitely.
Listen, when I want something, I get it. Alright, so good luck then.
Okay, so what is in green is what I have cut and also I'd gone through the line items, item by item with Brian. Does everybody have a copy? I have copies if you need them.
No, mine's just in black and white, sorry.
You have one green and it's the
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
There you go.
Eric, you have one?
I haven't,
Oh, okay.
Okay, so some of the costs were reduced, and it brought the budget down almost $80,000. And I met with the merchants yesterday and I did show them the budget that was presented in the packet on Monday for the SID, and pest control was included there, and I know that Coventry has an issue with pest control, and it was unanimously decided that Noble does not, and so that could change with restaurants coming in, which was the problem that we encountered on Coventry. They had a rat infestation when I was their executive director, but now that is behind them. So we did not allocate any money for that. And the street cleaning maintenance cost that was on the original, I've taken out completely. That was $25,000. We all kind of laughed about that. That is not gonna happen since the Columbus organization wants too much money for that. So that brought the budget down. Any questions on the cuts or anything else?
You mean just in general on here?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is just my initial, thought or impressions about this. I would expect for a merchants association that would be very heavy on promotion and events. And the website and things like that which is completely lacking right now.
Well, the website and all of that design is in here.
Oh, I mean, but it's
exist.
missing, it doesn't exist right now.
Right.
Some of these things, and this needs to be explored with the city. I would love to see the city bearing the landscaping and maintenance costs to get it definitely needs a beautification. I would like to see city resources spent doing that, even though they're not doing it for the other SIDS, as a contribution that the city needs to be make. We keep hearing that, you know, that Noble neighborhood gets ignored. So that is that's a decision by council to fund those activities and the administration that's willing to do that. So those are costs that I would like to see borne by the city. As I think, you're light on some of the promotions for summer and holiday, the amount of money that's put here in the budget for that. I'd like to see more money spent on those types of things. The mural, I just saw another city was looking for murals, and it was like $5,000 is what they were.
Well, I think, part of what we discussed before is we are looking, to address your initial part of the conversation, part of what we need to do is really change the entire dynamic on Noble.
Yeah.
And that means changing the merchant mix and everything else. So what I don't wanna do is be premature and start doing marketing campaigns and advertising when we haven't achieved that, because it just reinforces what we have now,
Yeah.
which is not what any of the merchants really want the perception of Noble to be status quo. And so part of what they were talking about, part of what we talked about yesterday was in terms of landscaping, for example, I talked to them about having every merchant on Noble purchase pots they don't like the big city planters that are there. They find them to be cumbersome, and they find that they're
It is.
detracting from the businesses. And so what we talked about was if everybody bought the same pot planter, that it would give us extra money to change out the landscaping as much as we wanted to, and it would have a beautification impact from Mayfield Road all the way down to East Cleveland, which would be huge. That's a really great
Yeah.
start for us. Also, we want to expand the district, per the suggestion of city council members and also City Hall, to include the Mayfield corridor that goes from where the cinema used to be to the BP station on both sides. So Franklin Myers is on our board, who handles the State Farm Strip. And we believe, again, looking forward, that having them on board, because they understand beautification, those particular landlords, that having them on board will help us move to a situation where other landlords will understand the importance of beautification of their property, and also just what it means to transform Noble in terms of they're getting more money from their buildings, and also the city having a better impact on what's there. So the landscaping, I'm 100% with you on that. I don't know whether the city's gonna go along with it. But the planter concept, everybody in the meeting was
Yeah.
on board about doing that. And I think it'll make a major impact if we don't have, right now, half of Noble doesn't have any planters at all.
Right.
And nothing's been done to move it. And I've contacted.
Right.
Those voters, we've been trying to
Yeah.
get those out there a
Yeah.
long time.
And so if we can transform that, that would mean not just a summer transformation, but also holiday landscaping, things like that, so that all of that area will have same impact all the way down the street, which would be great.
Right, I hear you, it needs to be beautified. My only comment is that to the extent that the city can step in and
Oh,
do
that would
these
be great.
things. The other SIDS, I think it is ridiculous how much money they spend on flowers and watering.
Yeah.
That is the largest component of their budget.
Oh, I know.
And to me, it's just, I don't know that you're getting your bang for your buck where you're spending and I'm not specific to this because this isn't, but for the other SIDS, it's a ridiculous amount of money that's spent. So again, to the extent that the city can't step in, yes, and I know we had a watering truck. I don't know if we still have a watering truck or not.
Yes, it's a lady that comes around and waters.
Well-
She's not a city person.
Oh, that's not the city
Yeah,
person.
that's-
Oh, she's
that-
outside.
that's
Oh, okay.
contract.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
on contract.
You know, can the city cover the watering expense? Just so whatever this, like the police monitoring, again, that's an administration decision. But I don't think the city should be charging any of these SIDS generally for providing extra police protection. I mean, maybe
Well, I know,
maybe administration and other council members don't agree with me, but
I know that when I did the Coventry Street Fair, the last one that I had, there were 27,000 people on the street.
yeah,
And the police department had a major impact on the number of police that I had there, and I had to pay all of them. And so it was a huge portion of the budget. And I'm assuming the same thing will happen if we end up doing any kind of street fair or anything on Noble, then I'm gonna have to talk to the police department too, because they're not gonna just let us do it.
and that'll be up to the administration and is council willing to fund the extra overtime costs for something like that. Again, my philosophy on that is, you know, each of these business districts gets a reasonable amount of extra police overtime for one event a year or something like that. This is me talking.
No, I understand and I appreciate that.
Well, that's how the city supports the business districts in actually helping out. But I know, and I'm gonna let you speak in a minute, but I recall the mayor saying something and at the last meeting about some things you had put in the budget that the city would not cover or would cover.
He said they wouldn't cover, and the items that weren't covered were the items that I kept in here. I mean, so he said like landscaping, snow plowing, sidewalk, snow plowing, all of those things the city would not cover and hasn't covered with other districts. But along those lines too, he also said that there were additional funds, like 70-something thousand, wasn't it, around that?
90,000
Yeah, it was somewhere,
with the
because of the development that's
development of
going
the
up
new
next to
building down
the,
Noble.
yeah, next to the laundromat. So, that money, I don't even know where that's coming from or who's in charge of that money or whether that's part of the budget. So I have all these questions kind of floating about what I'm working with financially.
Go ahead, Brian.
I think it may be worth a conversation, especially as we get into a next budget cycle when we're talking about landscaping and things like that, to make sure we're pulling in what is probably Parks and Properties, maybe Public Works, to talk about what their capacity is. Because regardless of the Noble and or Taylor conversation, you know, we don't always get great feedback about how we're landscaping our properties throughout the city, whether it's parking lots or how we're maintaining garages. And I know we've been making some progress, and maybe the labor contract that was just approved is gonna help with, you know, retention and staffing, so they do have more capacity. But I think ultimately, you know, making sure, you know, if some of these things can come out of her budget, making sure we're accounting for it, you know, on our end, you know, whether it's Noble, but also, you know, other, you know, public, you know, properties in the commercial districts, you know, throughout the city.
Is
So,
there a deadline on the funding for this?
Should be.
Well,
Or is,
since we moved it out of that
oh,
bucket
right, we
one,
did move.
so that it's less restrictive.
mhm.
What does that mean though, Eric? How less restricted? I mean, is there, like, are you saying we have to have the money spent by first quarter 2026 or end of 2025?
No, those ARPA restrictions don't.
Okay, good, thank you.
And I have a question too, and this, you know, it goes all the way out to year 3. I was just curious, I don't know if this came up in the first time, but like the snow plowing goes from 6,000 in year 2 to 67,000 in year 3.
Because they're gonna mark it up.
That seems like a really aggressive markup though.
We went up almost $12,000 on snow plowing on the sidewalks in Cedar Fairmount in a year. So I was just,
Times X, or 10X, excuse me.
it can come back down. I mean, I have to start with something, so all I was basing it on was what I had heard,
Okay.
what I had done before.
And then so back to the landscaping piece of it, like when I think of whether it's a commercial district, whether it's a SID structure or whatever, there's sort of 3 buckets of money that I think about in your budget, right? There's the admin organizational piece. There's sort of the physical place component, whether it be landscaping, snow plowing, whatever.
Yep.
And then there's the marketing, you know, and promotion, you know, side of it. So, you know, as much as, you know, if we have ability to take on some of the physical stuff and have them focus on, you know, kind of the marketing and branding piece, I think that would probably help their budget.
It would help a lot.
Wow.
I mean, the other question that came up, and I know this is outside of this, the purview of this committee, but it involves the streetscape project that Karen Knittle's working on, and specifically the lighting. And we had talked about the fact that what they would like to see is the lighting pattern that I had talked to them about before, which is that if someone's jogging down the street and they get to panel 5, then the lights go on there and then they stop and then they go into panel 6, so that there's more of a safety component than having lights that you have to worry about going in and out or worrying, like Lee Road's going through a lot with their lighting, they've told me. But so I didn't know whether that's part of the county budget that Karen's working on, or whether I should be including lighting in this budget, because that's definitely something that the merchants are
That's huge.
concerned about.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the streetscape funding, streetscape project is partially ARPA funded and partially city capital funded. So there's a gateway and wayfinding signage project.
Right.
That is county partially funded. And all of those, the intention is the plans get completed this year so that we can start to go to implementation. And while lighting has been a part of the conversation, I don't think that is factored heavily into it. So
Okay.
I think it's something that should be
Part of this conversation.
this, or maybe something that council undertakes.
Yeah, I mean, that's been major. That's come up in every meeting
And
that we've
I've
had.
talked about that with the ARPA funds since day one.
And I have one more set of related questions then.
Yeah.
Like whatever budget, you end up with here, is the request to council and the city for funding for a 3-year cycle, or the
No.
first year, or
Two.
2-year?
2 with potential carryover if there's money remaining.
Okay.
But we're not counting on that. And do you want to address what you've already talked about with the merchants about dues and, cause I know that you've discussed things with the merchants.
Yeah, we've absolutely realized that there also has to be buy-in from us. So we have discussed a due structure that we feel is attainable, something that's honestly something that all the merchants that would be able to afford to pay. We've talked about basically payment plans, so no one has to feel like they have to come out of pocket immediately for this, but realizing that, yes, we're business owners, but that we can't just assume that this is all just gonna be funded from other places. So we do realize that there's gonna be funding from our end, and especially once we're finally starting to work up, that we'll actually be working on getting grants from other places and building our funding that way, and then knowing that along with the city, with other grants that we can find and with our own funds, that we'll really be able to make a bigger impact on making this successful for the Noble community.
We have not approached the building owners. I know that they've donated to Cedar Fairmount events in the past. But again, I feel like approaching them is premature until we see that we've made some progress. And so we're not even talking about that yet, but they know that there is an assumption that they're gonna take over after year 2.
I had a question just on the mural, to Councilman Cobb's point. So presumably it's not just paint that you're thinking of hiring an artist, and that's maybe where the cost
No,
comes from?
so we really want to do an urban mural for Noble that's comparable to what's done in major cities like Chicago. We want something that makes impact if we're gonna transform the neighborhood into something like Tremont or Ohio City or any of those places. To do just a mural where we're gonna like get paint and have kids put it together is really not gonna do much. To that point though, we do want to involve the community, and because this person that we're talking with is an art teacher and is friendly with the head of the art department at Heights, they would be bringing in kids to show them how to do this, but they would be the supervisors, they would be the planners, they would be the designers. So it's not gonna be a situation where we're saying, okay, we're hiring this group, they're gonna come in, they're gonna put it up, too bad about you, community. We really want community involvement, and the community involvement might extend well beyond Noble, but that's part of our goal anyway. We don't want Noble to be just a Noble district, we want it to represent the entire city. And so in doing that, encompassing members of the city, because this person's an art teacher at Heights, would further that kind of thinking.
So here's my suggestion, that when we're done, that everyone go and take a look at Ohio City has a merchants association and they have a special improvement district. And my idea of what should be funded is more along the lines of a merchants association, which focuses heavily on marketing and promoting the businesses versus the special improvement district. And I just think given the financial limitations,
We'll have to take a look, but do they operate independently
They
or is
do.
one under the umbrella of the
I
other?
believe they do, but you know what,
I mean, I think I've worked with Ohio City before when I was doing
Yeah.
Cedar Fairmont, and part of what they have
City
is an
Incorporated.
extensive group of people that just go around and clean up the streets all the time and do maintenance there, and they have a huge budget.
it looks like they're two different corporations, Ohio City Improvement Incorporation and Ohio City Incorporated. I suspect the Merchants Association was in existence before the
It was.
SID.
But to me, I mean, after working with the SID, part of the issue that I have is if the district doesn't look good
Yeah.
and the maintenance isn't done and we don't work on the things that the SIDs are already doing, then we're marketing something that's not gonna work. And so I guess that what I was feeling was when they brought me on board at this, I was tasked to create something that would be transformational. And I think that it can't be transformational unless we really redefine what Noble's supposed to be, and that's beyond marketing. And I think that anybody driving down the street right now would agree that Noble does not look like the rest of the districts. It does not look as good as any of the other
That's
districts. And
exactly what I
so
was gonna say, when I've been here, we brought our business here in 2009. And these conversations, we've gone around and around and around, and you think about it, my husband grew up right down on Neela View, right by GE. And to me, Noble is a major thoroughfare into the city.
It is.
And one of the main things about it is we can promote the businesses we want to, but if I don't feel comfortable to stop, if I'm not driving down the street and I say, oh, what's that place? That looks nice. I want to stop there. It won't matter. So unless we do something visually with Noble, what am I going to market it for?
okay, so I'm gonna step outside of comfort zone here. When I started working with them, my first thought was, we can't get anybody to Noble if Noble is all hair salons and nail salons and barber shops. And interestingly to me, that was one of the first things that they said to me. So approaching it as a white person, going into a black neighborhood, there wasn't any reason for me to go to Noble if everything's a hair salon. So now what we're trying to do is bring it beyond that and make it what Cleveland Heights is supposed to be, which is a neighborhood for everybody. And to make it a neighborhood for everybody, people like Jeremy have to get involved and transform the merchant mix. And bringing all of that on board means more than just creating a merchants association. It means transformation of an entire district. So this isn't really a budget for either a SID or a merchants association. It's a transformational budget, and I guess that's the only way I can look at it, because we wanna change the name, we wanna change the look, we wanna change the merchant mix, we wanna change the frontage, we wanna do all of these things. And we wanna do it within a budget that makes sense for you, but it also has to make sense for the city, and it has to make sense for the people that are working in that district, so it's not something that they're just saying, oh yeah, they're just talking at City Hall about throwing money at us. I think we wanna go way beyond that. So this is not the budget that I guess I'm hearing that you wanna pigeonhole into a merchants association budget. Yes, it is a merchants association, but that's only because we have to start somewhere.
Yes, and then when you talk about diversity, as far as our organization providing free feminine hygiene products for girls and women in the community, the Cleveland Clinic did a drive for us for the entire month of May, and they went to 8 different district campuses, and they collected like a bunch of hygiene products for us, and so then they sent their representatives down to our organization here at 2197 Noble Road. And so it, you know, part of our concept is to get community involvement, stopping in. We've had people donate items. We also have a group of volunteers coming on the 18th from Singleton Partnerships. It's 8 volunteers. They found us through Business Volunteer Unlimited, which is BVU, and they're gonna come and put hygiene kits together for initiative that we have for Frontline 988. When they go out to see people in crisis, they'll have packages to bring out. So, just wanted to interject.
And just to add to what Myra said, just like seeing the effect of like changing neighborhoods firsthand, you need radical change to make lasting impact. I only say that because we have experience in this space, like opening in a place, just people who are unfamiliar with my background. I'm a restaurateur. I've been in Los Angeles the last 15 years opening restaurants, but I scale in underserved communities. So building something in Skid Row, which is probably the most impoverished district in the United States, it took radical change. People looked at us like we were crazy for coming into this space, but if you're the catalyst, if you come in and do something that will bring different walks of life through, it can change the neighborhood. And we literally saw it firsthand. Skid, a whole fairway of 7th Street was a very impoverished area, but now it's thriving. You see many breweries and art galleries and tattoo spaces, and people have a reason to come to this space. But it starts with somebody, and it starts with an initial change, and it has to be radical. And it may not seem, it's not the norm. I guess fortune favors the bold. So, my words on that.
I mean, we've been talking with Brendan Krastowski about opening there, and he's interested. We're looking at making major changes, not just going after the same merchants that want to rent in that district because they feel that that's just cheap to move in there. It's got to go way beyond that. And Tremont came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, because Michael Simon was there, it was like, wow, I'm going to Tremont, where people would never go there before at all. So we want it to be a destination. We know it's been overlooked. We feel that, to your point, it is a throughway for the city.
It is.
And it's a pathway to get to 90. And it's underused, so let's make it usable and let's transform it into something that it could be instead of what it is now.
I agree.
Question. The TWG purchase price, has that money been dispersed? Do we know?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
And I pulled it up, and I think we did amend it. That was $245,000, and I think the mayor had indicated a commitment early to spend that money in the neighborhood.
Yes.
So in terms of the physical improvements and developments, maybe that is some funding to do all of that in the beautification. And then we can hone in a budget that is more along the lines of a merchants association. But we need to firm up exactly how much of that purchase price, because I think there was an amendment at some point.
Yeah.
And that dollar amount may have changed.
It went down a little bit because
Yeah.
the size of the parcel included in the project shrunk, so it corresponded on a prorated basis there.
So if I could, here's my suggestion, is that we get together an initial budget to get a merchants association up and running. And then we determine what we can do with this money from the sale to devote to the physical improvements that are needed to beautify the area. Because I think you want to get this merchants association up and running and organize the website up as quick as possible.
I guess I'm a little confused based on what I just presented. If we do a merchants association and it's all about marketing, it still doesn't achieve what we need to achieve.
Well, we have to get together and get a plan for the improvements and how that will, best be done? And to what extent does the city have to follow contracting requirements to do some of these things?
Well, I know that, like, for example, Jeremy wants to open several places
Correct.
there. Is the city willing to back him with money to develop and to get into those spaces so that he can do them? I mean, he's talking about valid change for the district, and also Brendan, same situation. He wants to get in there, but is the city dangling a carrot, so to speak, and saying, okay, bring us
So I
these
would say if there's
merchants.
individual businesses that are interested in going to Noble Road, they should come talk to us now. I
Okay.
mean, there's funding and opportunities available, kind of, my take is this budget is more about the corridor and not specific businesses.
That's a separate conversation.
Okay, all right,
All right.
so, do you know Brian?
How you doing, Brian?
We go way back.
Well, I vouch
So
for this.
yes, myself and Julie, we're happy to have a follow-up conversation.
Okay,
And can I try to interpret, I think, what Councilman Cobb is saying is that all these things can happen at the same time, so that we fund the Merchants Association and the city funds it through these ARPA funds. At the same time, we use the TWG set aside to do the physical improvements, and if there's more funds that are necessary, that through the budgetary process, the city council commits funds so that it's all happening. But it's not the burden of the budget is not funding solely on the merchants.
okay, so how much should I base the budget on?
I think you need to hone it down further. I mean, you still have what I perceive to be some Mercedes items on here.
It's just, well, you now, give us some examples.
Well-
No, I'm just saying, you gotta give some examples of what the Mercedes items
Hey.
are.
And I guess my
Yeah.
question is, if the money is earmarked, what, if we don't use it, what's it going to be used for? If we keep shrinking the budget from the money that's allocated towards us, what's the money
But-
not
so-
gonna be used for?
So I guess, at least for the ARPA bucket of money here, and I guess this, while a different conversation, it's related, what, if anything, is going to be proposed for Taylor Road? For a merchants association potentially, because that'd be
Well, they-
drawing from the same bucket of money.
Okay, they're in a totally different position, and happily so for them. They found out that the 501c3 that they had created years ago can be resurrected. We have to start from scratch with all of that.
Mhm.
So, that's what they're working on right now.
And so at the end of the day, they're different corridors,
Yeah.
while both need help and support, and they probably don't need, you don't have to commit to funding them at the same levels, but just an acknowledgement that as we're talking about this pot of money, that
Yeah.
there's additional money, and all of it, which is to say, the money that goes to help the corridors as a whole means there's less money for individual business assistance on the back end then. So as we subtract from the 900,000, that's less going directly potentially to business projects.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So as an example, that leftover ARPA money could go towards
Jeremy,
Jeremy, or it could go towards any of your stuff, if you need assistance. So it's not that it's gonna just be hanging out there, it'll just be allocated in a different.
I'm just gonna be honest, the whole time we've been talking about this, I just keep getting this feeling there's resistance to spend the money on Noble. I just keep feeling like there's constant, like, there's always something, and it's like, that's just how I feel. Like it's being nickel and dime that you don't
And
want to
Myra said
spend the
it's
money
two
on
point
Noble.
five miles, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's 2.5 miles, so it is a little bit longer than the other ones.
it's way longer than the other ones,
Yeah.
and I think,
That's
the
part
budget
of it.
for, I know going through the SID budgets, we just breezed through them and presented them to council and they were done. I mean, this is my second appearance here and I understand what you're saying. And also having been with the merchants now for months and gone through and heard what they wanna achieve, I think we're all on the same page, and so it's a bit frustrating admittedly to come here and start from scratch again and decide that we're redoing a budget, it's gonna be a whole different perspective and that we have to start from scratch. Obviously, I'm willing to do that, but I know where they stand on this and I know their sentiment is that the time has come to put Noble on a pedestal. I mean,
Here's what I would suggest is that council gets together and we decide an amount of money to fund this. And then that's the amount of money that you have to work with, rather
okay,
than, you know, that you determine the priorities from the amount of money that is allocated to you, ignoring the physical beautification items that we would look to fund out of the TWG.
okay,
Excuse me, what
Money.
does that acronym stand for?
TWG is the company that is building, is it still Nobility Code?
Nobility
Courts?
Court? Yeah.
Right, and so whatever they were paying the city of paying Cleveland Heights for buying that land, 240 or something like that, is additional money that we would spend strictly on the beautification and the physical improvements. So there would be two pots of money.
Okay.
So on your budget.
Yeah.
You could remove all of the things that relates to beautification, but I still would put a line item of the amount he's talking about for beautification, so it's actually
it's still part of
in
it.
the budget,
Okay,
yes.
so what about the lighting component? Is that included in our end or the city's end, or where is that going? Where would that come from?
No, I don't know.
That's a discussion I think that's probably more involved than we can resolve now.
Okay, because it is a priority for them, and understandably so. I mean, in a neighborhood that people are afraid to go to,
Mhm.
having proper lighting is so important, so,
I would just suggest that if you had the number, that would be good to know.
okay.
But
So should I talk with somebody that actually produces that kind of lighting to have them draw up a plan?
thanks.
Okay,
And maybe that's the amount that you put in your budget is to pay
For
for
that
the
lighting.
plan.
okay, all right.
And then, if the city assumes, the cost of a lot of these beautification things, which I think that's awesome. After year 2, 3, when we could potentially move towards a SID situation for the upkeep of these things, the refreshing of these things, anything new that comes about, would that something that would now be assumed by the SID's budget and no longer being taken care of by the city?
Good question.
Like after-
Presumably, yes.
Okay.
But as I said before, my view is a lot of things that these SIDs take on
They shouldn't be doing anyway.
that I believe should be city,
Responsibility.
city-borne expenses, right? Because the whole idea of the city is you're providing extra
Mhm.
services that a city is not providing.
So we probably need to figure out what that budget is regarding what we think the city should be taking on, so we know exactly what that number is. You know what I mean? Like the snow plowing
Yeah, I
and
was just
some of
gonna
those
ask about
things.
snow plowing.
Like, if we take those numbers out, estimated numbers, then we would know what the actual number is for the city to take on for different areas, because then we would be able to see what the budget needs to be far as the upcoming budget. If council agrees that the city should take on some of this responsibility, we have to put a number around it.
And also, one other thing, I had hoped that we would meet the deadline for the CAC to get funding to do a summer promotion. That deadline is gone. So we're already looking at not the 26th year, we're looking at 27, because we already missed the 26th. Which is unfortunate, but I think that there will be other grants that we'll have access to as we move forward. And just so you know where things are at from that standpoint, our attorney right now is building the C Corp so that we can get an EIN and get a checking account and all of that good stuff. But the IRS is way behind in creating 501c3s, and they're working on November of last year right now. So we can't become a 501c3 immediately, but he is putting together the paperwork so that it's being expedited.
But you do have a fiscal agent.
Yeah, we
Yes.
do have a fiscal agent and good news too, that the county money that they had promised us, the $10,000, is now with Future Heights. And so other than $65 of that, we now have 9,000 and whatever. I am not a mathematician, my sister is. So yeah, so we do have some money, so I can pay the attorney, which is good, and I can pay the state for the incorporation. But beyond that, we really don't have any money.
Well, why don't we look at getting an initial amount of money in front of city council to approve out of the ARPA dollars as further seed money
Okay.
to get things up and running and maybe potentially have a Christmas or a holiday promotion and get the website and some marketing set up.
That would be great.
So could you give some thought as to that amount? I'd be glad to get together again with a cup of
So,
coffee.
well, no, I think this is what would be best. If maybe Myra, if you can set up a meeting with the merchants like you did the other day.
Yeah.
And maybe Councilman Cobb come
Okay,
and actually hear the conversation of all of the merchants, that's a part of that.
sure.
I think he would get more of a better sense of what they're talking about, what they want, and then maybe at that discussion that some numbers can actually really appear that we can bring before council.
Could I have Julie or Brian come to that as well?
She's always
Julie's
there. Julie's there.
was there
All
yesterday.
right.
Yeah, Julie was there. She's a part of everything.
Yeah, Julie was there already.
Are you
Happy-
weighing in
hap-
on any of the numbers?
Happy to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo what you said about how much it actually takes to go from what it is to what I think a lot of us sitting here imagine it
Yeah.
could be.
We have
And
to
she was in
invest
the
in
meeting
it.
yesterday, so she heard.
Yeah, so let's try and have that sooner rather than later.
Okay.
So could you set that up like ASAP? And if we
sure.
can set that up ASAP,
Yeah.
you're welcome to make sure you talk to this man first. Make sure you talk to these,
BFF.
yes, there you go. And then, you're more than welcome to, let
Jeremy,
them-
do you have anything to add? I mean,
I'm kind of just soaking in, kind of seeing kind of where you guys are, where we can come in and be an asset, and I think it's a lot of synergy there. I think with what we have, what we've proven to do, and the innovative concept that we're developing, and that we see for the space, based off the feedback that we've gotten from the community, I think we definitely have a concise plan of action that can really make meaningful change in the space. So.
And yeah, I think, thank you, Julie, for weighing in, but yeah, I think we really need to invest heavily, even just the first year or two, just to get something moving. And I like the idea of working simultaneously with the city to try to find out what the beautifications are. Because I know that when the mayor was sitting here, he did say there were some things that the city could not do.
Yeah.
And that's one reason I think Myra put it into the budget. So and I believe, and I'm just speaking from what I hear and what I believe the money from the TWG that I don't think the mayor would have a problem because it would be a part of a beautification for the whole district, not just for one area. So I think that would be an addition to the budget as well, but
he also was very supportive.
he was very supportive
Yeah.
of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So that's always a plus, but I'm just concerned that if he thinks that we're not able to do some of those things from the city perspective, how do we gotta have a plan B,
Well,
but
regardless of what happens next month, there will be a new administration in place for next year that will largely be making those decisions. And council for this year will be setting aside the budget numbers and budget priorities for next year.
Okay.
So yeah, we just need to set aside what those numbers are so that council is very clear what those numbers should be within the budget far as extra policing for events maybe once a year over time. The extra money for snow plowing, salting, and just that extra attention for, and not just Noble, for all the business district to see if we can rein in some of the costs that the merchants, SIDS or the merchants associations that come about that are spending less money and some of the stuff is being on the city.
Yeah.
So we need to know what those budget numbers are.
We have a good head start because Myra has put those numbers together.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and we also need to talk with the forestry as well to find out what their capacity is for doing some of this stuff, you know, and I think that's where some of the lag may be because, and then if they can't, plan B. Do we go out and get someone to help with that until we can get them up and running? So I think those are some things we need to
I just
look
have
at.
one last question. If we move ahead with all of this and we do it at
Lightning speed.
lightning speed, to your point, there's gonna be a new administration coming in. Do we have to start all over again and do this whole thing all over again then? Or how is that going to work?
I think these decisions will get made before the end of the year, but in terms of, you know, what services the city will provide next year will depend on the administration.
Okay.
But I think council will look to fund those. I mean, we've had some things we've wanted to do, but we need to know where we are, where the city's at financially
Sure,
by the end of the year
absolutely.
and next year.
Okay.
But so I would recommend, would you be willing to meet, well, first we'll find out what type of meeting you can get together, maybe at the library again.
Yeah.
With the full group.
Yep.
Cobb, myself, and Julie will come to hear what's going on
Okay.
and to get a better handle on what the merchants are thinking about, talking about. Then maybe right after that, you and I can get together to plan another committee meeting to put together and then talk about it. And then be able to move it forward to the committee of the whole. I think that's,
Yeah, we just may need counsel. I don't know that we need to pass any legislation.
No,
to
I'm
say
not
that
talking about
we'd like
legislation.
to have this allocation
yeah.
out of the ARPA dollars provided to them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's a policy decision, not
Decision,
necessarily
yeah.
a piece of
Mhm.
legislation.
Okay. Jackie, are you okay with this?
I am.
Okay.
I'm making notes to myself, I'm sorry.
How do you feel?
Alicia, you
Sounds good.
all right?
Okay.
You on board?
Or.
Good.
I call them, they're our stalkers. We met them for the first time and they have not disappeared. They keep coming back, so that means they're
It's a very good
it's
thing.
a very good thing. They are anxious and helping the Noble area, so that's a great thing. Yeah.
Can I
Yes,
ask one more question?
as many
and-
as you like.
And this is sort of a bridge on our agenda, but Reverend Hicks is not here because it's his birthday today.
Yes.
But has Reverend Hicks and Start Right plugged in? I think that's a connection that needs to be made at a coming meeting.
Okay.
I think to learn generally about the things that Start Right is doing, since they, overlap to the top half of sort of the area that we're talking about here, both in terms of housing and the, rehabilitation and, hopefully more new construction. But they were one of the partners with TWG on that project. And, they're looking to be more engaged with the commercial districts and the businesses and looking at new commercial development opportunities in
Okay.
that corridor. So I think it'd be good to draw him in and you guys connect. And
If you could send me his
be aware.
contact
For sure.
information, I'd appreciate it.
So I have a question. What is city-owned property on Noble Road that could be commercial district? That could be sold and rebuilt on? Because I know a lot of those buildings are privately owned as of right now. So
Mhm.
what, are you gonna move the sewer area so we can have prime property there or? No, I just wanna know what areas
There's
Our-
limited city-owned property
Yeah.
Mhm.
on the commercial district.
So whatever Start Right may end up doing, or anybody in the future, may not involve city property.
Mhm.
But, and again, this involves, a city administration and department conversation about, the old police substation,
Mhm.
there.
Interesting that you're bringing that up, that did come up in yesterday's meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, we really actually wanted that to be a community hub for the Noble.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm.
But I mean, beyond that, I don't know if there's a lot of specific,
There's a couple
City
of
property.
spots here and there, like at Yellowstone, there's that one piece adjacent.
That's actually part of the struggle.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ohio City, so I always love to come to meetings with Jeremy. I wear my construction hat these days, but I did 16 years in community development, really with a focus on, real estate development. So, Ohio City, Detroit Shoreway, I started my career on that side of town. And most of that was all, they acquired a lot of those buildings. I'm gonna say 80% of them. And so, even before you had, the Bobby Georges, they had site control. And they came up with their neighborhood plan, which they drew out the vision. Here's going to be the streetscape. This is going to be the Capitol Theater here in Detroit Shoreway. This is going to be a boutique. This is going to be Sweet Moses at the time, right? And so we don't want to talk to you unless you're Capitol or you're Sweet Moses or because you want to have that appealing, neighborhood. You don't want to necessarily block development from happening, but you want the highest and best use to come in. And I just, to this group here, that as many years as I did in community development, we used to always say, it's not as needed in the suburbs, right? But that's because the city of Cleveland and places like City of Cleveland around the country is last resort, right? Community development corporations are last resort developers. So
Mhm.
you reach that last resort, and then guess what? You don't have anybody else to turn to.
Yeah.
You're doing it now.
That's an interesting, phenomena, and actually, it's I would say a struggle for us.
Yeah.
While Noble Road and other parts of the city need new investment and improvement, it is nowhere near the Skid Rows
Yeah.
or where Detroit Shoreway and Ohio City was 30 years ago, where the values are bottomed
So
out.
that's where I think it's a blessing and curse, right?
Mhm.
I think that drawing out the plan and really having that buy-in from, if I'm an existing person, I have a cap that I've already capped on, right? If I'm a business,
Mhm.
This improvement, I'm gonna use the store at the corner of Woodview and Noble.
Mhm.
If you go to Mike and you say, hey, Mike, I want you to do $100,000, if you're not giving him physically that improvement, what is it in it? What's in it for him from being an owner operator there for 30 years, right? Since I was a kid. So those are some of the things, some of the struggles you're gonna have is because what's gonna take me over the edge, right?
Mhm.
And I think that vision sometimes does that, right? And just letting them see that, hey, this is what it's gonna look like when we're done with this.
Mhm.
And so I just, I don't wear that hat anymore, but I'm sitting here in a different position, but I'm just, as a Cleveland Heights native, I encourage this group to kind of think along those lines, right? In terms of now, how do we really get the buy-in from people who already are really kind of sufficient in a way. And this won't necessarily take me from being a six-figure to seven-figure, corner store. And so, or a restaurant, right?
Yep.
What I see, and you touched dead on it, and Jeremy and I, city planning and things of that nature is really I run parallel with anything that I do, even on the career field that I'm in now. I'm not gonna go down that road, but Noble Road is a gateway from East Cleveland into Cleveland Heights, or vice versa, right? And so, as well as coming from University Heights into Cleveland Heights. And so, what I see the true, I think, issue is that you don't have a specific target area on Noble because it goes from commercial to residential
To commercial.
to quasi-commercial residential to commercial again. And then this is your sweet spot down towards GE, because that is the business district of Noble. And so that's gonna look different, and those numbers are gonna look different from the other housing nodes or the other strategic investment districts that you have. And so it may not be earmarked to where it's gonna be completely, equal. And the reason why I say that is because, think about like code enforcement and things of that nature. In Cleveland Heights, a hanging gutter is a big deal because it's Cleveland Heights. And because, the code demands you to have, essential things. And it's not just to have a gutter, it's have the gutter because somebody's gonna get this house later, right? So have the gutter so that the foundation doesn't fail from, you're not having your water infiltration into your basement, and then this house becomes a house that we have to tear down eventually in the next 20 years, right? So think about it from that standpoint of like these things have ways of having a domino effect. And so the residential areas, those individuals, the folks that they have constant cash flow, because guess what? They're the residential side of it, right? I'm an apartment building owner. I'm gonna have cash flow here, and if I can jack up the rent a little bit, even $25, right? To make this contribution work, I'm willing to do that. But the businesses are gonna be the ones that are gonna be like, what's in it for us? And it better be something good, because if it's not, I'm okay. I don't have any code violations here. I'm running a legitimate business, but and it's sad at the same time because you want to do more and you want to do better, but they have to see that vision, because this is a conversation that has been had, right, for multiple years, and so so it's going to take a heavy lift, I think, from your guys' end. I'm not somebody here is going to critique any of these numbers. I think that some of these numbers can be moved to different areas. I think this budget is where, like, in line for sure, but I think, things like murals can be, can move, to his point, 35,000. Now this is just me speaking out of turn. 35,000, it might be 17 all in, right? But that other 17,000 can definitely be utilized in one of these categories here. So not getting rid of it, but definitely just reallocating it. But that, that's just my synopsis in terms of like what I see. And, if I'm coming up Noble and because Jeremy and I are like this, okay, Jeremy asked me, well, all right, okay, these 3 buildings we see here, we're getting ready to do a plan. We're gonna spend money, we're gonna take time to do this plan, take our time to do it, but who owns it? And I said, Jeremy. Don't worry about that part yet. Because at the end of the day, I understand what you guys are trying to do, but every person and every developer doesn't. So they don't speak that language all the time. They want it all, in a box with a bow on it, and they want it to be laid out for them. So some people that are thinking outside the box, like us, I'm not saying that we're a diamond in the rough, but I think that we understand where you guys are, where you are and where you're trying to get to. And I don't think that every developer will, or every person that comes before you will understand the larger vision without seeing it.
Right.
But if we're coming up Noble, I think Noble, those 3 properties that we saw, just literally can be that would be an eye changer. I mean, think about keeping the same sort of square box there, but a different facade, right? In terms of, signage and outdoor seating. Those types of things is what we need to see coming up Noble. And then mixing it with some of the Flower Boutique. You've been here for 50 years.
Yeah.
We want to see you here because it's important to attract new, but it's super important to retain the ones you have.
Yes.
So that's my 2
Yeah.
cents.
And I agree with you. That's why I because he's been wanting to expand and do some different things with his building.
Yeah.
The car repair place on the corner.
Yep.
He said publicly, he did not wanna do anything with his building because he was afraid that people would break out the windows.
Yeah.
And damage it or all of that kind of stuff. So he's not interested in as of right now, but once he sees things change, will be willing to invest in his
For sure.
building, so it's really about the change. And when I allocated that $2 million, which COP realized and understands that I wanted that $2 million to be a start with additional money from a developer saying we can do
Correct.
we can do a real streetscape because it's visual.
Yeah.
It's not about the housing and stuff that's there because you gotta bring people in to be able to go into those houses. And that's the important part because people don't realize that anyone who goes 90 just about comes down Noble Road.
Yeah. For sure.
You're coming down Noble Road.
It's good that both of you understand Cleveland Heights and that both of you are used to the city, and I love what you're saying. And I think that you realize what we're up against.
Yeah,
And it's not a small task.
I wanted to add, and thanks for your comments because it highlighted something in my mind. So, the planning department, we've been doing this sort of 2-year-long comprehensive planning, corridor planning effort for Noble Road, and I'm not sure everybody knows about it. We're actually at the point now where we have some recommendations and we're looking for input. It's been out there and we haven't really gotten the responses to that. So I'm wondering if at the next meeting we could have, Brian Iorio, Karen come and maybe present on that.
I would love
On
that.
gateway and wayfinding, because you spoke about it, like we've identified through the county locations with new gateway signage. And we want people to weigh in on that,
Yep.
to say like, this is the right location or this is not the right
Right.
location. Once we have the locations, then we're gonna go out for design through a sign manufacturer, so.
And
Now
that's,
we have the group
But
now.
I would like that to happen at the same time as you're in the meeting. One of the things that the Noble Merchants made very clear was they wanna restrict the number of meetings that we're having. So,
They can't keep leaving their place of
Yeah.
work to
Yeah.
go.
and so I would love to have the two of you involved in
Absolutely.
addition. Because I think all of this needs to be discussed at the same time instead of having piecemeal meetings. So if we can set up something that works on everyone's calendar, so that when the merchants decide that they are gonna attend a meeting, there's real meat to it instead of just being another meeting.
yeah.
And
So that
just
would be
the
helpful.
last part of it, which Brian had alluded to, is Start Right, Pastor Hicks and Jim Hicks III have their planning and redevelopment efforts. So I
Yeah.
think if we can
So
just get
what, do
everybody
you
together.
have an idea what that is? Since it's his birthday, do you have an idea what his planning and?
Well, they're looking at, that the Noble Neely area, so not just, they've been working on the TWG parcel, Nobility Court parcel, but now thinking about across the street, Save a Lot and that whole corner. So
Yeah.
they've got some ideas.
So they own that?
They do not own it.
Oh, okay.
But, working with Save a Lot and the other property owners to maybe have something that can be a reality. And so it's sort of to your point of like, yes, you have to worry about ownership, but sometimes you need the vision first.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just so you know as well too, I've brought in the county executive. And we actually walked from Mayfield to the border of East Cleveland to give him a visual of what Noble looked like. And basically I engaged the conversation with him because of the grocery store, that they needed a grocery store. And his vision was he could help. But he would like to take it all the way down to Euclid to incorporate the East Cleveland portion all the way up to Mayfield. And I had no problem with that because if it was uniform all the way down, it was perfect. And he brought his development director, and she looked at everything as well. I have also engaged with the owners of Myers. And I've also engaged with the owners of what's the market that just went up?
Grocery
Grocery
outlet.
outlet. And I've engaged with both of those actual owners. It was just a blessing that I was invited to the Myers opening and the owner was there. And he took my information. I told him what I was looking for because I really, and I guess I've never been ashamed about saying, Save a Lot may be a grocery store, but it's not a grocery store that we need. And we need something with good quality food.
Yeah.
And where people can actually have some real food.
Yeah.
And
That alone will change. I'm sorry, not to
that will
Yeah,
change.
absolutely.
And so I'm me personally, and you're here as merchants, I'm not interested in a revised Save a Lot. I'm more interested in a new grocery store, a real grocery store that people can eat at. And I mean, have healthy food and good food. So I've been kind of working to engage other people to say, come look, come see what's happening here. Because I think that would be a huge, huge uplift for that area.
But just to your point and piggyback off, you would need some groundwork will need to be laid to really
Yes.
attract those.
Yes,
Because they're not visionaries. They come to spaces where things are already, the wave is already set, for lack of a better phrase.
yes,
So, no,
yes,
that's
yes,
fair.
yes. And
You said
basically
what?
they talked about footage.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what they were engaging with me in the conversation with what was the square footage, and they were going to, what is that, they were gonna get a landscape of, yes, of what the area looked like, and we were gonna further have a discussion about that.
How long is Save-A-Lot locked into that
Yeah.
space?
They own it.
Oh. Dun, dun, dun. Oh.
Is that a corporate owned store or is that, okay.
The plot.
So from my appearance, I think there's been improvements over the last 6+ months in how that store's been operated because it corresponds to when corporate took the store over from the previous owners. So, and they've been much more forthcoming and proactive about putting money into the property since that occurred. The previous franchise operator was, probably, overextended and would say things but didn't have the capability of affecting change. But the corporate folks, both the ones on site and, the ones, at the regional level have been much more cooperative and, about exploring opportunities for better investment there.
How often do anyone from the city go just to visit Save-A-Lot?
I've been there a number of times.
Okay.
I'm probably in there a couple times a month.
Yeah, that's my job.
Okay. Once,
Not that,
I usually
and
buy something.
I don't see a reason to go back in.
yeah.
My
It's a lot
mother-in-law,
of generic stuff, I mean,
my mother-in-law lives on Woodview and she doesn't go in there. And she's cheap. And she
Well, we
doesn't
met with them and talked about possible storefront and that kind of thing. I mean, I think that whether it's Save-A-Lot or someone else, I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of real estate there in that parking lot that certainly isn't used by vehicles.
I guess the bottom line is when you're looking at this, even with Myers that opened in University Circle, it's a question to your point, Jackie, of would you yourself, the people at this table, actually go to shop at that place? I wouldn't shop at Save-A-Lot. And
I would and I do. I mean,
You do?
I buy stuff when I'm in that neighborhood and I stop in there and buy things, absolutely.
but is that where you would do your weekly grocery shopping?
I
Or is
could,
it-
yes.
or is it-
I mean, I don't live in that neighborhood, so
Right,
like
yeah.
it's not, something that I do, obviously, but I would have no problem doing regular
Okay.
grocery shopping there. But I mean, at the same time, like I don't have a problem, I do most of my grocery shopping at Aldi. So I don't have a problem with,
Yeah.
generic
Me too.
off-brand.
I go off,
But it's
That's
even,
my
I think
go-to all
even
day.
with generic and off-brand, there's still a level of quality
Yes,
and experience that I just feel like, and Aldi has branded themselves that where now it's cool to shop at Aldi. It's not like this, ooh.
The Save-A-Lot corporate folks can fully admit they have as much of a market branding problem as much as anything. Cause at the same time, your generic products are probably coming from the same
Same
manufacturers,
Yeah.
regardless of who the
Yeah.
store brand is.
probably, yeah.
I know
Yeah.
Trader Joe's and Aldi's are all the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
corporation, so it's the same.
And like things like, doing a better job with, they have a butcher at the Save-A-Lot store some days of the week, so you can get specialty cuts. But like not enough people know about that. If there's an opportunity to do a deli counter there, and expand some of the offerings that would make people more, comfortable or apt to use those, types of stores.
Got it.
And you're talking about Save-A-Lot in particular, correct?
Specifically right now,
Okay,
yeah,
got
yeah.
you. And it might be a matter of, having that discussion with corporate and seeing if they are open to not necessarily making it a more community-friendly variation of Save-A-Lot, especially since the new developments are coming and kind of the demographic has kind of changed. And since you said they're behind on marketing, I feel like if we were able to come together and kind of like maybe pitch some ideas that
This could be a
Potentially.
prototype. This could be a
Correct.
prototype for change across everything. Using this neighborhood and this specific store as an example to
Yeah.
say, hey, if you rebrand yourself, if you do these things, look what happened here.
Right.
And that could change.
But they would have to do a really upscale level of what,
I've never been
What
there,
it
so
is.
I don't even have a real true point of reference.
go take a look.
So yeah, I have to know.
I use it for just if I run out of something and
Yeah.
it's close, I just go there and get
Yeah.
it, but just regular shopping, no, I don't do that. And I mean, even visually, it's not appealing.
No, it's not.
It's not appealing at all, and I don't wanna go any further.
I mean, I went in there, I love orange juice, so I was looking for orange juice, but they only had like orange drink. And, you
Gotcha.
know, it was just, I'm a nurse, so I'm looking in the medicine thing, I don't see Benadryl or Tylenol or whatever, you just see just all this generic stuff and it's just, I don't know. It wasn't appealing to me, but I do see a lot of people in the neighborhood walking to that store because my place is right here. And I do see a lot of foot traffic going back and forth
They have
to
no
Save a
choice.
Lot. Yes.
They're
So they
walking
use it and they're walking to get there, yes.
because they can't drive anyplace
Mhm.
else.
Well, I think they acknowledge there's certainly room for improvement for how they
I think
operate
they
that
would.
store. And I would say if you haven't, if someone hasn't been in there in within the last 6 to 12 months, I think there were definitely times under the franchise ownership who was overextended, where there were periods of time where large numbers of things weren't getting stocked. They weren't bringing in products, they didn't have the cash flow to, to bring in new product to sell. But I think last few times I've been in there, everything seems, stocked and up to date and better than it had been previously when they were receiving a lot of the criticism we had heard.
And who are
over
they
the last few years.
communicating with? Are they communicating with the residents to find out what the residents want? Or are they just communicating with Start Right or you all, or, I mean?
I think they've
where's
been
the
communicating with Start
I
Right
think
some.
they've been with Start Right a little bit,
Mhm.
and I mean, like I said, we've been working with them a little bit. I would say in the last couple of months, it's been a little bit slower. I don't know what that's about, like in terms of making contact with them. Right before I left on vacation, so about 10 days ago, I did email the regional, Tanya's regional, I think, the
Mhm.
person who's regional manager, just to say, hi, are you still,
Yeah.
interested in the storefront? We're still here, no pressure, but, we're happy to, so there's,
And I think from our perspective in our
Relationship.
conversation with them, regardless of the store operation piece, we think there's a way the property physically interacts with the rest of the
With the-
neighborhood in
for
terms of
sure.
all of that pavement and landscaping and, make it a more inviting
Yeah.
part of the corridor.
Well, the back
And
area.
across
Yes.
from Notability Court, like there's gonna be however many apartments
Right,
of
yeah.
folks living there. I mean, to be able to
Walk right across the street.
cross in a safe way,
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, and hopefully that will, I'm quite sure that will up their game a little bit. I mean, just like Dave's did with
Zagara.
Myers. Myers, right,
sure.
Oh,
building right
right,
across from
Richmond,
each other.
yeah.
Yeah, they upped that Dave's like nobody else's, but I wish they would do Severance.
So what are we doing about coordinating this meeting?
So,
And
You're
what's the
going
plan?
to.
I'm gonna coordinate the
You're
meeting.
gonna, yes, you're gonna,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
but you're gonna reach out to everybody who was at the meeting yesterday where I stopped by.
Yeah.
You're gonna add Cobb
Karen,
and,
Brian,
And Start Right.
Start right,
Sorry.
this is your meeting.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Definitely wanna talk to you.
Sure. I think
Okay.
you guys should actually get a picture of a Save-A-Lot and say the best picture that you can. Cause I think it's universal Save-A-Lot. I mean, I don't care if I'm in Columbus, if I'm in LA, it looks the same.
Yeah.
But there are some that have canopies with like block pillars.
Yeah.
That's more enhanced. I mean, say, hey, this is if you're gonna be here, this is the one we want, right? Because this is what's coming right across the street from you.
Yeah.
Which is X millions of dollars. And you're gonna want this foot traffic. And we're gonna try to steer them as much as we can to go to Severance because unless you make these types of upgrades, I mean, people don't feel safe coming to the store. I mean, and they just don't, and they don't your product and everything. It's more of a discussion base. I mean,
That's great.
Is Nobility Court still getting a coffee shop?
That's what they're working on.
Mhm.
Alright, cause
I
the
think
Nobility Court,
nobility.
Nobility, that's the apartment.
Is that
Oh,
what
that's
you were
what-
talking about, maybe having something in the
Oh,
bottom
new
of that?
part.
Yeah,
Oh, the new, oh.
I know when you first introduced yourself, well, you have to talk to them.
Well, we're gonna have a good third space where people are gonna
a nice
dwell.
Several,
Okay.
For sure, several.
So
several
coffee is
spaces.
usually a good,
Absolutely.
good way to do it.
Yeah.
Definitely, without a doubt.
But yes, that is the, and Reverend Hicks can talk more about their progress on that, but yes, that's the idea, and that space is in that building for some sort of coffee shop cafe.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's the dialogue, yep.
You too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
okay. So we have our homework.
Yes.
And we'll, as soon as you set up the meeting and we'll all be there.
Jackie, you have a list of everybody's emails for the district.
I do,
Great, okay. All right, we're good.
alright.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all so much for a
Thank
wonderful
you.
discussion.